Hello, everyone. I'm Russ Horrell, iSentia's Chief Revenue Officer. Thank you all for joining us here today. It's my pleasure to set our scene and introduce you to our amazing panel today. I wanted to start first by acknowledging the Kaurna people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respect to their elders past and present. As you all know, iSentia is the OG of media monitoring in Australia, and over the past 40 years, we've built and grown a successful business based on helping media and communications professionals to make sense of the media. At iSentia, we believe that it's our obligation to not only provide the best media monitoring tools of the trade, but also to bring the media and communications community together to network, learn, and address collective challenges and seize collective opportunities, which is what we're here to do today. We do this in collaboration with our partners at the Communications and Public Relations Australia, or CPRA. We've been associated with the CPRA for a long time, since we were called Media Monitors and they were called PRIA. And we do this because we both believe in the power of connecting and uplifting the industry. iSentia also has a long and proud history of working in South Australia. Our decades-long commitment to providing the communicators of South Australia with local expertise means that we have long been in on the so-called secret that you've all known about what makes this state so special. And we've had a front row seat watching the evolution of the rest of Australia and the world realise that too. We're really excited today to be able to bring together some of the communications leaders who are shaping South Australia's story, drawn from the fields of government, tourism, education and industry, to explore how South Australia's brand is evolving and what that means for those charged with telling its story. Let me introduce them to you. First, we have Sasha Meldrum. Sasha is a highly accomplished director, strategist, and trusted advisor with a distinguished career spanning over 3 decades. She is currently the director of Nova Systems. Previously, Sasha worked as a senior government advisor in portfolios including national security, defence, major projects, justice, regional development, and tourism. Welcome, Sasha. We also have DJ Arsenlagic with us today. DJ is a strategic marketing and brand leader with more than 20 years of experience in higher education. Her background includes leading global digital recruitment with deep expertise in student engagement, cross-functional delivery, and audience-led campaigns. DJ brings clarity, creativity, and purpose to everything she leads, and as such, it is no surprise that DJ is soon to be Adelaide University's first Director of Marketing. Welcome, DJ. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Verity Edwards. Verity has over 25 years of media experience and is a highly respected consultant at Hughes Public Relations, with a deep understanding of the media landscape in South Australia and nationally. She has worked in various media types, including radio with the ABC and 5AA, TV at Channel 7, and in the print at The Australian, covering a wide range of issues such as politics, education, court, sport, and the arts. Verity is also an experienced media trainer, helping clients understand media operations and prepare them for their moment behind the mic. Welcome, Verity. Next, we have Chris Burford. Chris is the Executive Director of Strategic Communications and Engagement at the South Australian Tourism Commission. He has more than 20 years' experience in PR, media relations, strategy and management, and brings a wealth of expertise in communications and media management from both the public and private sectors. Chris previously worked as the Corporate Affairs and Media Manager at Beach Energy and as a Communications Director for Premier Jay Weatherill. Chris is passionate about telling a South Australia's story and has a deep understanding of the media landscape, strategic communication, and stakeholder engagement. Welcome, Chris. And last, but certainly not least, is South Australian Client Solutions Director at iSentia, Dave Otto. Dave has an illustrious career at iSentia that spans over 25 years, starting as a senior press analyst working in 1999. Dave has come a long way since working the night shift in the previous millennium. He leads the South Australian business for iSentia and is as passionate about creating strong partnerships built on mutual respect and deep understanding with his great clients as anyone in the iSentia business. We couldn't possibly have a better moderator for this discussion today than Dave. Dave will ask questions of our panelists for about an hour, and then we'll have the opportunity to get the roaming mic out and you can ask questions too. We'll obviously get through as many of those as we can. We'll wrap up by 10:30, but we have the room till 11, so if you'll have the opportunity to ask any extra overtime panel questions or have any discussions. Okay, let's do this. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you for everyone coming as well. Just great to see so many of you here. Like many of you, I'm fortunate to have been able to grow up in South Australia, but I didn't always feel that grateful, to be honest, growing up here. I lived in the country at first. I lived in the hills. Finally, I moved to Adelaide. Like many of you raised here, mine was a quintessential middle-class upbringing, city estate that was safe. It had good healthcare, it had good education. But growing up here, for me, having not been anywhere else at that time, Adelaide seemed bloody boring and I couldn't wait to leave. As the saying goes, those that haven't left Adelaide, bag Adelaide. Those that haven't been to Adelaide, bag Adelaide. Since then, I've been fortunate enough to see a bit of the world, and by leaving South Australia, you realise just how bloody good this state is. To me, I feel South Australia has undergone a similar transition as to I, a realisation of its qualities, and we feel more confident, to me. We seem to have shed some of our old stereotypes. We seem to care less about those who are still holding on to some of those stereotypes. Our economy is stronger and more diverse. Our new events are showcasing the best of us to a larger audience. Post-COVID, less traffic, less stress, and our quality of life no longer equals boring or backward or a lack of opportunity or lacking in opportunity. This morning, with some of the state's most experienced communicators, we'll explore the role of communications in South Australia's evolving identity, and we look forward to communications challenges ahead of us as a state. Chris, I want to start with you and your role at SA Tourism and ask you to reflect on South Australia. We seem to have the wind at our back at the moment. We have a better economic outlook. Events like Live and Gather Round have filled our hotels and provided economic stimulus. But how much does that translate into the way South Australians feel about their state? And when South Australian Tourism Commission looks at data about our brand recognition and our appeal to external audiences, how are we faring? So both our view of ourselves and how we've seen externally.
Okay, I'll start with the second part. We do a lot of data capture in the South Australian Tourism Commission, which informs both marketing and public relations. And one of the data sets is around appeal and consideration. South Australia ranks 6th out of 8 on appeal and consideration. So we are, I think if you ask someone, name a holiday destination, there's about 20 different holiday destinations that they come to before they start mentioning South Australian-based destinations. That shows how much work we still have to do. So I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves when we talk about how well we're doing as a state. We've got a lot of work to do. The communicator and in me thinks that's an opportunity because I know what media want. They want undiscovered stories. They want new things. They want to find something interesting. When I was at the in Brisbane for the last ATE event, there's a thing called the International Media Marketplace. You've got about 150 international travel and lifestyle journalists. The first thing I had to do when I sat down with them was show them where South Australia is on the map, right? So that's the starting point internationally. We are, Australia is an exotic destination. South Australia is a particularly exotic destination. That said, your points that you raise about, the Live and Gather Round effect in particular, building into the confidence. One of the other data sets that we pick up is around state pride. And I've always found this one very interesting. And we're actually pulling ahead of other states. We are number 1 on state pride. When we ask people the question, how do you feel about, are you proud to live in the state that you live in? We're number 1. and we've actually got a little bit of daylight between second, and that's been a trend that's emerged post-COVID. Now, there's a few theories kicking around about this, and I think what your introduction touches on a number of those in terms of the confidence that we have, through events like Live and Gather Round, shining the spotlight on the state, and I think the perceptions around South Australia being, or Adelaide being boring, have really been shaken off to a degree from those events. How controversial are you letting me be today, though, Dave? Because I do have another theory, and the theory is to do with that inferiority complex that we carried around on ourselves probably since 1995 when we lost the Grand Prix to Melbourne. And we used to, you peek over the neighbour's fence and go, oh, geez, I wish we were a little bit more like Melbourne. Like you said, you live in Adelaide, and I think, life's, a little bit, the grass is a bit greener on the other side, more vibrant, more happening. I reckon during COVID, South Australians, that gif of the girl in the back seat where she's doing that side eye kind of move? I reckon that's what we were doing when we were watching Victoria during COVID-19, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden it didn't become as appealing as it used to be. So I actually think that South Australians just reflected on that and go, you know what, I reckon we've got pretty good here. I reckon we've got the Goldilocks zone of we're big enough to have what we need and we're small enough to still have that connected community, the country town vibe that we like. So I think that new appreciation for that happened as a result of COVID-19. Yes, there was, the live and gather round effect and all those things that are built on top of that. But I really think COVID gave us an opportunity to reflect on what we had as a state, who we are as a people, and just go, you know what? We like that, and as you say, we care less about those perceptions now. I think every time someone says something negative about South Australia, we shrug our shoulders now. We used to feel like this need to engage and say, oh, well, we've got this, we've got that, but I just think we don't care anymore. It's not an arrogance. It's just we do it with a humility, a South Australian humility. But the data does show that we do have that that advantage on state pride. We feel good about ourselves. That's notwithstanding, I must say, this data goes to June, and notwithstanding the current impacts of the algal bloom, which I think I'm sure will come up later on. But challenges like that, which feel unique to us and make us feel a bit confronted and in some ways alone, could impact that. But we'll get to see how that impacts the data.
DJ, you obviously have a lot of experience promoting South Australia to a global audience. When you reflect on the changes you've seen and the conversations you've had over your career, has that sentiment about South Australia, the decisions students and families are making to move and to study in South Australia, have you noticed a shift?
Yes, sorry, just testing the mic. Yes, there's been a significant shift in that for sure. Just reflecting on your, where's Adelaide, where's South Australia? I moved with my family to Adelaide back in 1998, and that's exactly what we did. We opened a big atlas book and said, okay, where the hell is Adelaide? So it has changed significantly. Globally, I think it was known very much as a regional city, which was not really appealing to international audiences. So I think that has now shifted, and everything that you spoke about it really shows that South Australians have embraced South Australia. We don't have that, Sydney Opera House to brag about, but we have absolutely everything else. So for our international students and global audiences all around, basically it is a welcoming state, it is a supportive state, it is a diverse state, it is a safe state. So this is what we're seeing, that sort of shift for our global audiences. And this is what matters to their biggest influencers, their parents, when they're sending their kids to the international education. I think what has obviously changed in all of this is, with the merger of the two institutions and us needing to fare on a global scale and be a bit bigger in that to play nationally and internationally. I think that's already starting to see shifts as well in the education, because for our global audiences, it's all about world-class education and that quality that they will receive here, take back home to help their economies and their societies. And I think that's really key for our global audiences over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Sasha, AUKUS. Considering the enormous scale of the undertaking and the required workforce for it, how acute is that challenge, and how are communicators facing selling South Australia and the careers in defence that we'll need for AUKUS?
Yeah, AUKUS is, I mean, it's bandied around a lot. Everyone talks about AUKUS, but not a lot of people know a lot about it. Really, it's a wonderful shiny thing in the corner that somehow represents safety and defence of the nation. So we know it as sort of one part, which is the nuclear-powered submarines, which is AUKUS Pillar 1, and AUKUS Pillar 2 is more around advanced technologies, such as drones and other technologies and quantum technologies and other things. So I think, AUKUS is huge for South Australia. It's huge for the development of and the growth of the defence industry in South Australia. The numbers alone are sort of make your eyes sort of blink when they're talking about in the order of 20,000 people being employed in the years to come just in the naval shipbuilding sector. You're talking about just on the nuclear-powered submarines in the order of 5,000 people being employed in that project alone. So it's a challenge. I hope we're up for it. To me, I think there's a lot that needs to be done to encourage students to go into that field. There's a lot of encouragement that needs to be to bring people from overseas to work in the sector and from around the country to come to Adelaide to work. So it is a huge challenge. Personally, I feel that we need to look at different things such as policy persuasion areas. In the military, for instance, you have free HECS to go into the forces. Perhaps we should look at things such as free education if you are going on to work in the defence industry as a non-uniformed person. That's like one area. Those sorts of things are attractive to families and to students. If you're doing a degree, perhaps the last 2 years can be embedded within a company, so you get paid employment. It's those sorts of things that I think we need to start thinking about how we attract students into the field, because the challenge otherwise is just too big to fill those broad roles that we need, both from everything from, in the past when we've looked at shipbuilding, I worked with the Air Warfare Destroyer project, where I was on the management team there, and that was, we had to scale up from 200 people to 2,000 within a couple of years. I mean, that was a huge endeavour in itself. To now look at what's needed, but you also need, in addition to significant numbers of blue-collar workers, you now need huge numbers of advanced technology, nuclear scientists, which we just don't have at the moment, and we have to attract those to our state. So there is a huge job to do. And I think it will take people from all sectors. It will take academia, it will take government, it will take private sector to all chip in and do our bit in a coordinated way to sell the state, to get people to come here. And the last thing I'll say is the challenge as well around defence industry. I think we need to, as communicators in the communication side of things, is try and encourage community sentiment behind it being a great industry to work in. With very young people of today might see the military as very much an industry of war games and things they don't particularly want to work in or be associated with. There's a small section that would shy away from that. And so I think it's really changing that narrative a bit and talking about it being, part of global peace and peacekeeping and part of, national security and the security of our region, as well as talking about if you go into these industries, you can expand and grow and do other things such as advanced technologies and keep yourself very interested for the rest of your life and keep learning. So I think that there's a few challenges there. So it's, a bit of work to do.
Verity, the media landscape has obviously changed, South Australian media landscape especially. Newsrooms are smaller, the way we consume news has dramatically changed. Trust in the media is at an all-time low. The Edelman Trust Barometer, very low in terms of the way people view media and its trust. given your experience in newsrooms, but also advising clients, can you reflect on that change? How do you view the media in South Australia? And what's your advice on for the communicators in this room on how to navigate that new landscape?
Okay, that's a very long question, but we do media training at Hughes, and one of the things we always talk about to engage with our clients is how the media is changing and how we can better engage with that media. And the big change has been in the arrival of the internet. And I know it's been 15, 20 years, 20 plus years. But as an example, I started at the Australian in 2005 and left in 2017. And when I started, we had 9 journalists. When I left, there were 2. And now it's mostly people interstate that are covering the South Australian stories, which is really disappointing for a national newspaper. But times are tough in the journalism world, and a lot of that is to do with the contraction of the media, and the contraction of the media has generally been caused by the fact that the internet came along. And we say to clients, I mean, who would spend $30,000 or $40,000 on an ad for TV or for radio or a half-page ad in the advertiser? And look, people will, and people still want to reach those audiences. When you could spend $20 a day on LinkedIn targeting the exact demographic, the suburb, the gender, the job title, the exact audience that you're trying to target, rather than an ad that's going to be on Channel 7 at 6:37 in the morning. So a lot of people just aren't spending that money, and it's not just on advertising, it's on birth notices. Who's going to pay $100 to tell people on a Saturday morning that they've had a baby when they can share it with their own friends and the people that care to them on Facebook or whichever platform they're on? So there's that, other than deaths. And I know that a lot of people still put their death notices in because the demographic is still reading the advertiser that wants to know who has died. And the funny thing is we still get a lot of clients that want stories in the advertiser because they think they can reach the biggest audience. Now, we know it's not necessarily the biggest audience. We know it meets a certain demographic, but it still has that prestige, even though they've lost generally the whole upper tier of their reporters. But we know that if we want to get a story that might reach government eyes, we'll be targeting in Daily, for example, because we know that that's read by business and politics and people that we might want to get eyeballs on. So for us, it's working with our clients to reach the audience that matters to them. So if it's your general public and you want a nice picture story on a Sunday morning, then we might target the Sunday Mail or the advertiser. If it's something government related or something that's industry, we'll aim for in Daily. If it's something that makes a great TV story, we'll aim for Ray of Sunshine on Channel 7. And we've got one client, for example, that is very much B2B. They have factories in 15 countries. It's one of South Australia's largest family-owned businesses. But you cannot go into a supermarket and buy one of their products. So they have no interest at all in mainstream media. So if we suggest, say, this would be a great profile story about a new product on Channel 10, they're not interested. They want coverage in industry publications. So we will target packaging news or Australian manufacturing, and they'll take every story that we run because we know that the people that they're targeting as potential clients will read those publications, and that's all they care about. So for us, it's working with clients to understand what their needs are and why, and be smarter about how we're communicating rather than scattergun and going for, let's try and get something in the advertiser, which we know that won't necessarily work. They might not be interested because we also know that they're very much driven by subscriptions as well. So they're looking for people and stories that people will click on, things that can be a bit more sensational or someone that's prepared to click on that story to read it so that it can raise their revenue, because that's one of their fewer avenues now to raise revenue. So it's being smarter in how we communicate what our clients need or what the state needs, if it's something that is beneficial to, I guess, growing state pride or getting South Australian businesses onto a national stage.
South Australia, in terms of selling South Australia, Chris, like our brand anchors, it's food, it's wine, it's festivals, it's a Barossa Red, Coffin Bay, all those good things, right? But it's not a Sydney Harbour Bridge, it's not a Mona, it's not a Great Barrier Reef. The Simple Pleasures campaign and the latest advertising that I'm seeing from SATC, it's much more subtle. It's not as overt in its messaging. Can you talk about that campaign and communicating a more nuanced message and how difficult that is?
Yeah, sure. And caveat that I'm not a destination marketer and I'm not going to take any credit for the Simple Pleasures campaign, which is very much led by the SATC marketing arm and Eric DeRuza's team. That said, there's a few different approaches that you can take with destination marketing. You can use the icons. If you've got the icons, your Ullaroos, your harbour bridges, etc. You can do what we've probably done in the past and is focus on tourism product. Adelaide Oval, Southern Ocean Lodge, etc. Tourism experiences. The thing that so we've done a lot of that, and we're still 6 out of 8 on appeal. The other approach is around a place brand approach, right? And if you think about Tasmania, so Tasmania is a good comparison point. Small jurisdiction. It's actually number 2 on appeal behind Queensland. So our chief executive, Emma Terry, she came over from the Tourism Tasmania, led the Come Down for Air campaign. If you think about just in your minds, think about what it feels like to be in Tasmania, right? You've got a bit of a sense of what Tasmania is and what it feels like. You probably do that same thing for Queensland. Like you've got an idea in your head how it feels like to be in Queensland. It's not something South Australia's really done well at. I would like to give people a sense of how it feels to be in South Australia. Mm. So the research that underpinned the Celebrate the Simple Pleasures campaign did a lot of introspective kind of, asking South Australians who we are, what makes us tick as a people, to really establish this place brand foundation. So if we're going to tell people what it feels like to be in South Australia, we have to know first, right? So it was a research piece that the team embarked on, which involved a lot of one-on-one interviews, focus groups across the length and breadth of the state. And it had 4 findings from that research. And they're consistent with some of the themes I mentioned earlier on about recognising that we've got a good life here in South Australia, that we have, that right balance of things, that there's a sense of momentum in the state, that we're feeling that momentum that we have post-COVID. The one finding that I do want to unpack just for a second is this one where people were asked the question, what's your biggest wish and greatest fear for South Australia? And normally you'd expect to get different answers. And it was actually the same answer. And the answer was, we want South Australia to grow, but not change. And I think that is a quintessentially a South Australian thing, right? And to give a real life example of this, I was walking down here from the office and walked past the development at the Crown and Anchor. And I thought that is a classic example of grow but don't change, because this push for further student housing, which is extremely important for the state to grow the education sector, but we are not losing the Crown and Anchor. Crown and Anchor is absolutely essential. I have plenty of beers on those sticky floors, growing up. But so Adelaide Oval's another great example, right? You could just knock it down, build a stadium like Optus Stadium in Perth, Bob's your uncle. But, we retained the heritage scoreboard. We retained the things that make the Adelaide Oval so great. So grow but don't change. And that was something that maybe that's why things can feel really difficult getting done here sometimes, but maybe that's a good thing. There's often a lot of grumbles about the Parklands Authority, or, every time someone wants to do something in Adelaide, the NIMBYs, etc. But maybe they're just keeping a watch on us to make sure that we don't do things that are inconsistent with the values of South Australia, so that we can grow but not change and not lose the thing. We don't want to be Melbourne. We want to keep being Adelaide, right? Or keep being South Australia. So grow but don't change. Fundamental thing about the place brand finding about South Australia. Last one was about that new appreciation that the world is actually looking for the type of lifestyle that we have here in Adelaide, and we are not great about telling people about it. In fact, some people come to us and say, can you just not tell people about what we have here? Because we don't want them all coming here. And we wouldn't be doing our job if that was the case at SATC. So that place branding research was the underpinning research that sat behind Simple Pleasures. We know audiences are burnt out, and I don't need to go into the reasons why people are burnt out. The perma crisis that we've had since about 2019, it's just one thing after the other, disruption. And what the traveller need and what people are looking for. We found this sweet spot with the moments that we can create in South Australia that are in abundance, that it's, these simple things. They're not, it's not, extreme sports or anything in South Australia. It's connecting with planet and place, and connecting with storytellers, and connecting with artisan, the growers, the makers, the things that we do so well in South Australia, which are just in abundance. So that was what underpinned the Simple Pleasures campaign. What's different to the Simple Pleasures campaign, which you'll find over time, similar. So Tasmania is in year number 6 of Come Down for Air. You would recognise it with the black and white. It's a very simple campaign. It's quite obscure in a way, but that's a very place branded campaign. And you'll see that in the TVCs that are produced by SATC, South Australian agency called Frame. One thing I just want to quickly touch on, going into the last election, the Premier made a promise that it would be a South Australian agency that would develop the next tourism marketing campaign. And at the time, I think there would be probably some in the SATC that I would say thought that was not a good thing, because you want to work with the best, doesn't matter where they're from. But they've really, through the process, changed their view on that. And because Celebrate the Simple Pleasures and the attempt to really speak to authenticity of who we are as a state can really only be done with the South Australian agency that gets what we are as a state. So Frame Creative developed the campaign. South Australian artists throughout, you've seen the paintings, all commissioned works from South Australian artists, South Australian musicians. The pieces on their TVCs are all commissioned, like new pieces done by Adelaide bands. It's dripping with South Australia, and that allows us to be authentic in our voice and who we are, and speaks to that confidence that we had. So time will tell if it shifts the dial, but it's really trying to establish that sense of place. I think that you also talked about like some of the tactical challenges of communicating.
I guess the challenge around communicating a more nuanced message. It's not as overt as and not as simple as a harbour bridge or Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, and in working with journalists and our destination public relations team, runs a FAMIL program where we bring out journalists from around Australia and the world to come and experience South Australia. And like any other field of journalism, the last thing you want to do is tell them what to write. So what we do is we have a show, don't tell approach. So we are finding those simple pleasure moments across the state and in each one of the regions, and connecting them with those simple pleasure moments. And what FAMIL programs have looked like in the past is a journalist will come to a destination and have an itinerary where they do like 8 things in a day. They'll go jump on a bus and go and experience, 8 different things and taste this and move on, and they'll rightly be exhausted by the end of the day. But the pressure to show them as much tourism product as you can is what wins out. So we've taken a conscious decision to strip that right back and just give them 2 or 3 experiences, give them a few hours in each place, let them stop give them a free hour in a particular spot on the Eyre Peninsula and have a glass of, Clare Valley Riesling and stare at the ocean and just soak it in, as opposed to just putting them back on the bus and taking them on to the next destination. So we want to give them the space for those simple pleasure moments and hopefully take that back in their writing. A few adjustments we've made. One more I'll touch on is we're experimenting in New Zealand with connecting, doing hosted FAMILs with characters and storytellers as opposed to us hosting the FAMILs. So you lose a little bit of control because you want to be the one that sort of shows them, but having the locals who are the characters and connecting with those people, those authentic South Australians that tell the story better than others, particularly First Nation storytellers. Like this is a great way to demonstrate our authenticity and how we can do that through the media.
Sasha, Nova Systems, like you operate in so many different, so in defence, in space, in emerging technologies. They're highly technical. It's classified at times. They're difficult industries to communicate about. How do you craft compelling narratives and talk to such a diverse range of stakeholders with your communications?
So yes, there are different market segments that we do target and we do message separately. Emergency services, and we're a global company, so we do a lot of search and rescue technology onto things like the Dutch Caribbean, helicopters and various other different elements. And so we do market and target different audiences. A lot of trade magazine, but at the end of the day, our biggest client, we're moving as a company from what we've traditionally been known for, which is test and evaluation and assurance, capability assurance, predominantly as a professional service provider for defence. We are now moving more into a systems integration and a product company. And so with that comes a greater focus on core client, which is our defence client, and looking at those areas and those capability areas that we are growing into. And so I think part of that communication challenge is to attract people in. We talked before around attracting people into the defence sector. In our sector, it is around, we are trying to attract the smartest in their field to come and work for us. And as one of the largest Australian defence companies, we really push hard around that technology advancement and development. And I think if you can continue to keep people attracted with a knowledge-based learning, particularly for the group of people that we are communicating with to come and work with us, that is probably the best way that we can do that. And so, we do use buzzwords such as AI and machine learning and all of those sorts of things, quantum technology and cyber, but they're real things that we are working on throughout our business. And so we are trying to attract people to come into those areas and showing them how we would adopt that technology for capability growth. The other hard thing for defence industry at the moment, and we talked a bit before around AUKUS. Well, the challenge is that AUKUS has swallowed up a lot of the defence budget nationally. So what that means for other industries in the short term is that there aren't so many other defence projects being funded. So that's a challenge. A lot of defence companies are downsizing at the moment in terms of their workforce, which when I talked before around the challenges of workforce, thinks, how can that be possible? Because, people losing their jobs in the defence industry and people think defence is flying high. So we're going through a ripple effect at the moment. And so I think one of the challenges is to try and keep more people in the defence sector so that when those jobs open up further down the track, that they have avenues to actually re-enter the defence industry into those programs that we know are going to need their resources, rather than them going off and working in mining or energy and other areas which might be like-minded industries that they would naturally gravitate towards. So there's a real challenge on at the moment to retain the skills that we need to be able to do the job, and then to attract the best and the brightest to come and work for our company, knowing the growth path that we're on for the future, which is really in national interest and security interests. So communicating in an area in defence where things are often restricted, so we will often win contracts where we can't actually announce them because of security arrangements. So, but that's not the end of the world. You find a way to communicate those and to communicate it in a way where you're describing the benefit or the reason why we're doing things and the capability and the technology that we're using, rather than the actual contract that we have won, and what benefit that will have to particularly the Defence Forces. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer to a question, but there's a few different factors there that we have to consider.
The coordination across sectors, across government, industry, universities, obviously. I mean, is it there? Is there a consistency in the message and what's required?
I think there is. There is a certain consistency across. I think there probably could be more collaboration across those industries than there is. I think there'll need to be going forward to have to be able to achieve what will be asked of the industry and of government going forward. So there'll need to be more of that. I think one of the huge benefits also that South Australia has is that we have the research and development arm of the defence sector in South Australia. It used to be the DSTO, now it's DSTG, and so we have that in South Australia, and that is a huge benefit to us. So when we're talking about growing in capabilities and advanced technology areas, we really need to be capitalising on that R&D and moving forward on that and working with the academic sector and bringing all of that to bear. So I think there's a lot to be gained by looking at that advantage that we have and working together in a very collaborative way.
DJ, universities obviously have very varied audiences and stakeholder groups. You've got leadership, you've got government, you've got industry partners and donors and academics and students and alumni and prospective students, media, the wider community. So there's a few groups that you need to consider with your communications. It's also the matter of a new university launching with Adelaide University next year. How do you manage to communicate effectively across all those different stakeholder groups and best understand and connect with those different audiences?
Great question. Yes, we do have many varied audiences, 100%, and it's very difficult. But I guess it comes down to knowing those audiences and doing a little bit of an audience audit exercise and looking at what some of the messages out there will make those audiences tick. What are some of the emotional connectors versus rational connectors, right, for those audiences? So our undergraduate cohort won't want to hear about locally here. The same story won't stand locally as it is globally, right? So it's really noting what matters to those audiences, whether they're undergraduate or postgraduate audiences, whether they're researchers, and what makes them come to, go globally and come to an institution such as the new Adelaide University, alumni, industry, etc. So I think what's really bedded into the core of the university and for both two foundational legacy institutions is really connecting with those industries and offering degrees that will give practical experiences to our student cohorts, would connect with industry, would partner, give you, post-study work opportunities and things like that. We partner with government, and I think this is really critical. We leverage a lot from SATC. We also partner a lot with Study Adelaide, who do all of that sort of destination marketing and huge legwork for us in that sense. So they do already communicate to our audiences in breaking some of those myth busters out there. But then it's up to us to tell the story about academia, about our products and how we actually leverage and communicate with industry here. It's connecting also with our many internal stakeholders, and student experience is a big one. So for all student cohorts, it's knowing about what those students' needs are. For global students, it's about connecting with their clubs and societies and making sure that they've got somebody to talk to, when they need support about their health or their career progression, etc. Alumni, it's knowing, what research we're connecting with so that they can leverage that in their area. But it comes down to those authentic, genuine stories that we as communicators are saying every step of the way. We can't just create one core message. I mean, one core message should exist, right? But it's how you nuance that message to that market is what we really need to focus on. If an emotional connection to an industry partner is saying one thing, then don't go with another message. So it really is finding those sweet spots about emotional and rational connections and knowing at every step of that journey what message you need to be saying and in what platforms. In creating this new university, we've obviously had to create the new brand, the new creative platform. We had to create, websites. We had to create publications. We had to create our marketing automation campaigns. So it's really at every step of the way, whoever you're communicating with, it's absolutely integral to know what makes that community tick and how you connect in with the rest of the university. If you think about, say, for example, our academics often go out into the countries. We take South Australia to them. One of our visits, we take our local produce to them, right? So to your point, when they're for meals and education agents and partners are coming here to explore our state, we do limit to a couple of experiences because it is a lot, but we have a lot to show. But then we decide how we bring our state to them in the same way. So it's not talking at them, but it's showing them those experiences. For communicators, it's choosing the platforms that will then do the message proud, right? So you really need to look at all of the many platforms that are out there and what message you sort of pitch in each one of these platforms, and it's not going to be the same. I always say that it's a different skill set to try and write short messages than it is to do long form content. So it's many varied audiences, but you really need to do the groundwork of who those audiences are, surveys, quant qual information out there to actually really decipher and bring that message out.
And internally educating your bosses, your other stakeholders around your effectiveness in communicating to those different audiences and reassuring them that you're on the track. How has that changed? Is that more difficult than it once was, or with so many different platforms and so many different audiences, has that become a lot more difficult?
It has become a lot more difficult. It has become a lot more difficult with obviously the merger of the two institutions, because now you have all of a sudden a larger group of internal stakeholders to begin with. But then all of these internal stakeholders, they're used to communicating in their own channels. So say, for example, international recruitment staff, for the love of me, I cannot get them to, jump on Teams, for example. Like they're all about WhatsApp and, other platforms. So it's sort of communicating that message through to them in the platforms that they're actually using constantly. So it's knowing what they want at every point in time and giving them snippets of information. So for example, in the creation of the new university, there is just so much information that is being given to us and that's been created on a daily basis. And then how do you effectively communicate that without inundating our cohorts? And that's a real challenge. And there is a lot more platforms out there, but it is keeping that message consistent, concise and really clear, and just, honing in on that message time and time again. So, yeah.
And Verity, that measurement, that reassurance of your clients in terms of you are on the right track with this strategy. Like, no, just trust me, this is going to work. Has that become easier? Are your clients more understanding generally that you do need to have a more nuanced, a more audience-led approach to strategy?
I think definitely, because there's no point saying we're going to get you a big spread in the Australian if it's A, not likely, or B, not going to meet their markets. So if we can say, look, this is better for your business strategy and this is better for your target market if we go for, say, an in-daily story, then it's going to work for them because they're going to get the results. Really depends who the client is. It depends what they're looking for, and sometimes it depends on who your contacts are. We had a story with one client yesterday. We were putting out a release. We went to the advertiser because we knew they wanted that wider hit, and we got the story in the advertiser. And then we targeted 4 or 5 regional publications because that was also sort of their secondary interest. And we had ABC Stock Journal and the Port Lincoln Times pick it up really quickly. But that's their target market because it was a school. They have borders in those communities. They weren't interested in a TV story. They weren't interested in anything else. They just wanted that sugar hit with the advertiser because their high profile, and then they wanted the secondary one in those regional markets because it suited their demographic, and obviously borders are important to them as well, and they have engaged communities in those areas. So it's knowing what suits the specific market and having them as well building that trust relationship with your client as to say, we think this is going to work better. This is working with them to identify their audience, and this is how we're going to target those audiences to meet your needs so that we can get those results for you in those markets that are actually going to make a difference.
Are you finding you're having to provide more data about that effectiveness? Are you having to show, or are they trusting that your experience and your understanding of where they need to spend their efforts, or they're demanding more actual information of your success?
Some are demanding, but then I think you develop that trust pretty quickly. And once you build those relationships with those core markets for certain clients, the results come. And we don't necessarily need ASR these days because you just never know whether that's accurate. Audience figures aren't accurate.
It's not. It's definitely not.
Well, and look, I like to use it because the figures are big sometimes. And I like the audience figures as well, but they're not all publications or outlets have audience figures or ASR. So we always need to clarify that while these are great figures to have, especially when they're big, they're not always as accurate as they might be in the community. And we know that, some are a bit rubbery, but that's the industry that we're in. I think sometimes for us, even if there's no ASR or no audience for a publication, the fact that we can get a story in, Farm Weekly for a client that is doing things on a big stage. I'll give you an example. And I'm sure they would mind us mentioning them, so bear with me. Has anyone heard of CH4 Global? Okay, well, of course you have, Phil, because you've been spammed the last couple of days with CH4 Global stuff. Okay, has anyone heard of Asparagopsis? Okay, has anyone heard of the seaweed that you feed to cows that reduces the methane in their burps? See? Okay, so that's CH4 Global, right? So not everyone knows who they are, but CH4 Global is a client of ours, South Australian based, built this eco park on Louth Bay and opened it in January. Over the past week, it's at the stage where it's scaled up, the growth of this Asparagopsis seaweed, which is native to South Australia. And it's been, for the first time in the world, it's being sold commercially. The beef produced from cows that have been eating Asparagopsis seaweed for the past 400 days in butchers. So it's in a butcher in South Australia, and we're working with supermarkets and a couple of restaurants as well. But for us, it's a South Australian company, but they're working with farmers all around Australia, and they have deals with major agricultural companies in South Korea, Brazil, India, a restaurant chain in the US and in the UK, and Mitsubishi in Japan. So they are really happy to get a hit in Farm Weekly. And they are really happy that the story from the advertiser was syndicated in the Townsville Bulletin and the Toowoomba Chronicle. So for us, some people might think, it's just a hit online somewhere. For them, it's a really big result because they're reaching the national farmers' audience. And we know that if we get a story on the Country Hour, then farmers are listening. So it's the right markets. And that Country Hour story might be Country Hour nationally, or that ABC story might get syndicated and actually be heard in outback New South Wales. And that's exactly the market that they want to reach. So for us, it's not necessarily the audience or the ASR, it's where it's being heard and reaching those markets, and that's the success for them. And I guess the other successful thing for them is that they don't get any government subsidies or grants, yet the South Australian Trade Minister, the Premier and the Federal Trade Minister came over for the opening in Louth Bay in January. And we've been able to build this relationship, this we don't want anything relationship from the state government, and they can see the value in the export market and reaching a South Australian startup that's really reaching global markets to make a big impact on the climate and reducing methane emissions, which is one of the largest causes of greenhouse gases. And the more we've worked with the South Australian government, the more it pays off, because they took the CEO on a trade mission to Japan, for example. So we know that it's working by creating those contacts and reaching those audiences and getting out to a national community. So it's knowing your markets and why you're reaching those markets, and then that in turn shows the success for your clients, and they trust that you can reach those markets.
Excellent. I'm conscious of time. I want to give enough time for everyone to ask some questions. I might just close in terms of if you can sum up one sentence in terms of your focus from a communications perspective in terms of what we've discussed today. So in terms of South Australia, the need to really connect with those audiences. What's your one key takeout, Chris, that you'd like to leave the audience here today with?
Keep an eye on the work of Brand SA and the place branding piece, because the foundational research that I talked about earlier today is going to be something that's available across public and private sectors, and a way for South Australia to tell its story. You know, I've got the pin. We're more than a pin. There's a story that sits behind the pin. And to give you a taste, have a look at New Zealand's story. They do it really, really well. It's a way for them to talk about who New Zealand is to international markets in a consistent way. That's not about taglines. It's just about who we are. So that work will evolve and be released, I think, in the coming weeks and months. And please, everyone keep an eye, because it's for everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Sasha?
I think, I spoke a bit about collaboration, and I think from, the challenges that we have in the sector that I work in, I think collaboration will be key to success to get some really good wins in this area. I think the other thing in terms of the big thing in the sector that I work in is autonomous. So UAS drones, that technology is the future. And so I think it's looking at ways that we can identify what we bring to the table with things like the AUKUS agreement, which is the tripartite agreement, obviously with the US and the UK. And so looking at what does Australia bring to that table, how can we collaborate to identify the technologies that we do well or best globally, and how can we then not do everything, but do the things that we do well, collaborate, identify those and market those into the world and export them. And so it's collaboration on the communications front to be able to get to that point in time where we can actually get the best out of those industries and work together with the small SMEs, work together with the mid-tier, medium-sized business and larger businesses in Australia in particular, and grow that sovereign defence capability to be able to eventually export that to the world and sell that to the world. And you don't get to that point without having a really solid communication program right across the board and talking to everybody about it to get everybody engaged. That's probably it.
Thank you. DJ?
Hopefully we'll just be short and sharp, but please be bold in your storytelling. Please stay humble and authentic, because I do believe that South Australia is exactly that. So that's it.
Thank you. And Verity?
I would say think laterally, because we've got good stories to tell, but it's telling different stories to different audiences and thinking about what's going to appeal to specific audiences and why, and thinking outside the square with not just the big sugar hits, it's those little sprinklings along the way that might actually be more fruitful sometimes. So think about what your needs are, and who you're trying to reach and why, and how laterally you can think.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll move to some questions. We've got 10 minutes until 10:30. Ross is hovering in with a microphone. So if you do have a question that you'd like to ask our esteemed panel, please raise your hand. If you could just introduce yourself, and we'll go to some questions. Hopefully.
So we haven't mentioned the elephant in the room, which is the algal bloom.
Happy to take that. I've been running point on this issue for SATC for some months, and took a couple of weeks of leave recently, and the government response really escalated in that period. It is devastating. It's a great unknown. I think there's a lot of fear in the community at the moment. I think I've, in my time with the Premier's office, I think worked on a lot of different disasters, floods, fires, statewide blackout. But this is a new one, right? This is one that there's a lot of uncertainty around. We're all learning at the moment. We're in that phase of understanding. I've been participating in the community forums. It was in Brighton and Semaphore last week, and I'm off to York. There's one in Victor Harbour today, and I'm in York Peninsula on Thursday. Our tourism industry is severely impacted. They're reporting a lot of downturn. That downturn's coming primarily from South Australians who are not booking, cancelling. There is coverage interstate and overseas, but it's not nearly as much on the radar for interstate and international audiences as we might think. That said, I'm sorry, ABC did News Breakfast and Tyre Special on the Algal Bloom yesterday. It's devastating for our industry, our coastal communities. The phase we're in at the moment is very much about community information and people getting an understanding of what's safe and what isn't safe and how we can modify our behaviours. SATC is doing a bit of a research piece at the moment to understand, are people willing to travel to an algal bloom impacted area? What would it take for you to travel to an algal bloom impacted area, or would you just rather travel to the 70% of the state that's not impacted by the algal bloom? There's a lot of challenges that come with it. In regards to sustainability, and that's a really important story that we haven't really touched on for South Australia at the moment. And we're a leader in sustainability and have been in a long time in terms of our response around clean energy and single-use plastics and recycling and all of the things that we've done just as part of our DNA. And we've got this massive ecological disaster on our doorstep that's not of our making as South Australians, but as an impact from climate change. And then you got the lens of another thing we haven't talked about today, which is COP, right? So you got COP potentially next year in 14, 15 months. God, that's frightening. On our doorstep with this massive ecological disaster, washing dead fish on our beaches and the marine devastation. Very, very challenging for the state at the moment, and throwing up a lot of questions. Very much a community information phase that's going to support tourism for tourism to recover. It doesn't even feel like we're in the recovery phase yet, so we don't know when that's going to be. But some really good people working on this at government level, but also it's a bit like COVID. We don't know what the endpoint looks like. Is this going to be something that's going to not be here this summer, or is it going to endure for years? So, really, really challenging. I agree, it's the elephant in the room. And, for us as communicators, I think our comms has to be, fundamentally backed by the science. The science is the important bit at the moment. I wasn't in government during the COVID period, so for those of you who were, I think probably had that experience of knowing that, getting through the facts and cutting through the misinformation and stories of, we were talking before about Chinese warships and all the sorts of theories that have been kicking around. The facts and the science and access to the experts is what's really important right now. And I think we've got to build that confidence back into South Australia if we are to, live with the bloom in the same way that we live with COVID.
Any other questions?
I'm Mariel. I work for Society PR. In terms of kind of balancing priorities for South Australia's community and how we communicate its identity, how do we balance, communicating it as a place to live, so we're not having that brain drain of young people to interstate and abroad versus a place to visit? So, how do we tackle kind of balancing those priorities, which is more important in terms of keeping our identity and growing it?
Happy to have first crack at that one as well. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think in a place branded approach, and I think the great thing with tourism is it gives people a real taste of what a place is like before you go there. So people often visit a place before becoming residents, and I think what we've seen in South Australia in recent years, we have had a growth in interstate visitation. It's actually performing quite strongly at the moment, and people are coming back. So a lot, particularly with live and gather round, for example, getting a lot of demographics that weren't coming to Adelaide before that are coming here, and they're making it an annual trip to come here. And when someone comes here more than once, they go back and they're an ambassador for your state. So it's become a pilgrimage to come to Adelaide. It's something I remember I was walking around during Gather Round this year, and seeing these groups of friends, and I got speaking to one group, and they'd come from different parts of the country, and it was a pilgrimage. One was from Brisbane, one was from Perth, one was from Melbourne, and Adelaide was where they'd gathered, literally, gather round in full effect. So, and this was the second year they'd done it, and they were planning to do it for the third year. It was going to be an annual meetup. So I think using the state as a vehicle for tourism to give people a taste of what the state is like as a place, and I think is a great opportunity.
There's a lot to be said, I think, as well for promoting South Australia as a knowledge economy, and I think Study Adelaide is doing a really good job with that, because they don't just sell the nice things about South Australia, they talk about the education opportunities and the job opportunities, the growth areas, growth industries, whether it's defence or science or so forth. I think that's really important, and they're reaching, whenever they're doing their outreach in whichever country, they're spreading that word to the younger demographics, to the 17, 18, 20-year-olds out there that are considering studying in Australia and why they would come to Adelaide. So it's the quality of life. We're in a small city. If you're in one of the university education buildings, you're walking distance to any of the campuses. There's a lot of accommodation around at Flinders as well. It's just a different style of accommodation. But they're promoting South Australia as a knowledge economy. I found it, just one little anecdote is years ago I was an exchange student in Belgium, and my host sister's son came and lived with us for 3 months 2 years ago, and he was 16. And he came from a small town of 50,000 people, really stagnating economy. It's in the middle of Europe, 10 million people. The economy in Belgium was based on, coal mining, and industries and car manufacturing, which isn't that profitable and so forth, but not a great growth economy. And he came here and he looked at Adelaide, which is, we're 1836, we're not that old a city, sorry. And he said, and translated into English, he said, it smells like money here. Because he walked down North Terrace and he saw that whole West End precinct with the health and medical research buildings, the growth in the universities, the developments around the place. And he said, where does the money come from? And I sort of had to think about it for a minute, and knowing what I do in years in the media, you say, well, we have a strong resources industry. We have a stable government, relatively stable government. We have agriculture, aquaculture, energy. We have all of these different growth industries that are very strong for the state. We have low unemployment, relatively low interest rates. So we're in quite a stable, relatively strong economy with a knowledge base. He looked at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning, because he was into IT and wanted to come back and study here. And I had to really think, well, maybe we don't promote our knowledge economy as much as we should, and perhaps we take for granted this idea of, yes, it's a fantastic place to live, it's easy to get around, we've got wine regions on our doorstep, we've got great beaches, but we've also got this growing economy that is doing quite well, and we need to think about perhaps the strengths that we have and promoting those strengths to that younger generation as Study Adelaide's doing. So a long way to get around to your question, but I think we also take for granted that we do live in a knowledge economy here that is quite progressive.
Sasha?
Can I just add one thing around post-COVID? I think we all in this room would realise that we're actually all ambassadors in a way for our own state. And we may not even know it as much as we're living it, because we're now online more than ever through Teams meetings and things. So if you're a company like ours, you've got offices all around the country as well as overseas, but that's no different to so many others. And so I think there becomes a normal conversation now around what did you do on the weekend, and people are actually understanding more how good it is to live here based on the conversations we're having online. And realising, so it's not just a gather round experience once a year, it's not just looking at how they're finding out about the state through various channels, but they're hearing it every day through their colleagues, and they're actually understanding the experience that they're having on the weekends. They're understanding how good it is to be living often less than half an hour's drive from the CBD and from your work and all of the benefits that come with that and growing a family. So I think there'll always be a brain drain to a degree. 14-year-old son comes back from the Gold Coast, he goes, "Mum, it's boring here." Sure. So, he's probably going to be one of those flight risks, and he's going to go and travel the world, and you'd expect that to be so. But the attraction of bringing them home and being connected with people of a higher age group where they're perhaps thinking of looking at the next stage of their lives, getting into the mortgage belt, having children of their own, and understanding how good it is here to be able to raise a family and to be able to work and to have these amazing experiences. And I think we share that all the time when we're online.
And that's international students as well, isn't it, DJ? When they return home and talk about South Australia and how wonderful it is here, right?
Yeah, they're our biggest and best ambassadors, really, when they go back home. Like, you get international students that are undergraduates or your, 17s, 18-year-olds coming here and living their best life, getting a degree, going back home or trying something else over here. But you also get students who are bringing their families here, postgraduate students who are looking at living here while they're studying with their own family. And that brings such an enormous challenge to them. They have to secure some sort of a job here. And they have to put them in schools. They have to find accommodation that's, not just a student accommodation out there in the city. They have to be probably in suburbs, etc. So their experience is totally different to what undergraduate student experiences are. But the more of our audiences or our students come here, our partners, our agents, they're the ones who are carrying that story as our best ambassadors out there, and they're our key opinion leaders and influencers in all of the countries across the world. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I think that's an element that South Australians really need to remind themselves of the power of those international students and the ambassadors that they are when they go home. I think we at times forget that. We're just over time. Thank you so much to our panellists for your time and your generosity today. It's been, I think, really thought-provoking. I think we've all really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful to see so many of you here today. We've got the space for a little bit longer, so don't feel the need to rush off. But, thank you so much.
And I think a really special thank you to Dave, who is the heart and soul of our Adelaide operation. Dave and Phil and the Adelaide team really did put today on, and thank you to CPRA for partnering with us, and to the panellists, thank you. I think whilst there are definitely challenges near and far, there was a lot of joint language about success and growth, and I think we're all really eager to see where we take it. We have a tiny little thank you for each of you, and in lieu of anything bigger, I'm really proud to say we'll be making a donation to the Hutt Street Centre. So thank you so much. And yeah, like Dave said, we've got a little bit of time, so stick around and chat to the panellists for sure.